Let me start by setting a scene. After neglecting global warming, 47 countries were forced to disperse CW7 into the atmosphere in a desperate attempt to cool it. The attempt backfired as the world entered an ice age, and all life went extinct. The only surviving life is aboard a self-sustaining train created by Wilford. At the surface, this movie might seem like a warning to our generation, but in reality, the desperate situation and the train that is surrounded by it is a vehicle to present an entire society, its inner workings, and the ideas it presents about the future in a 2-hour movie. By the end, we learn with Curtis everything about the train, the most important being that the future, symbolized as the sacred engine that runs the train, controls every aspect of the present. A driving point for this argument is the eventual presentation of why the train has an authoritarian dictatorship, and why this becomes so obviously necessary when the viewers learn the complete workings of the train, or the future. To find where this idea came from, I will first go through the history of the modern dystopia. In the 1500s, a utopia was defined by Thomas More as a perfect world that doesn't exist. At that time, it was envisioned as a small society where there is mutual trust and a connection with nature. It was a place to be found, a Garden of Eden of sorts, as presented in Gulliver's Travel, or Utopia by Thomas More. Agrarian law, or ideas that limit personal property, was widely included in the ideal world. For a long time, this world was influenced by the ideas of communism and equity amongst everybody. But over the decades, the typical utopia has transformed into a world that is not only created, but also parts from agrarian law, as it leaves many problems unsolved, showed in Stalin and other communist icons' rules. The new utopia includes luxuries and a commodification of everyday life in a never-ending vacation. This is where dystopias emerged. The world of infinite luxuries was impossible, as some people had to produce such luxuries. This, combined with many problems of our age, like climate change, gave our current society a greater look into the future, where the technological paradise that was once envisioned seemed impossible. Snowpiercer, like WALL-E and many other dystopian movies, take almost exactly from this idea of a commodification of everyday life. In addition, there is the idea that a utopia for the few is a dystopia for the many. The train, just like many modern utopias, was originally created as an infinite technological vacation. Within the train, sections closer to the front are filled with luxuries. But like the modern dystopia, Snowpiercer follows the same blueprint outlined by Lepore in A Golden Age for Dystopian Fiction, where the rich have the money, sex, and drugs, while everybody else suffers. With the motivation behind the world created by John Ho, the director, I will now present the climax of the movie, where Curtis, the hero of the story, is confronted by the dictator, Wilfred. Curtis leads a revolt from the impoverished tail section to the front. The scene begins with Wilfred explaining the train's class system.
Curtis, everyone has their preordained position. And everyone is in their place except you.
That's what people in the best place say to people in the worst place.
To him, everybody has their place on the train, and although some are better off than others, in order to keep the train moving and the future progressing at its current state, his system is the only way. Curtis obviously has trouble accepting this, as it heavily favors a select few, including Wilfred.
The fact is, we are all stuck inside this blasted train. We are all prisoners in this hunk of metal. Medium rare.
From Wilfred's perspective, everybody is a slave to the train, a slave to the future, given the present continues on its current path, with the same amount of luxuries and commodities. Up until now, we have been observing Wilfred cooking a steak, an intentional decision that presents some irony. How can Wilfred complain about his situation when he is cooking something Curtis hasn't eaten in 17 years? The director's choice of including this is to show the audience how crazy Wilfred's ideas are. John Ho, the director, wanted to create a parallel between what was logical in the audience's and Curtis's mind and what was logical in Wilfred's mind. His intentions were to make us ask the question, why does Wilfred think this? Sure, it benefits him, but he acts as if it is the only way to drive the future forward. Well, it turns out that the answer to this question has been developing throughout the entire film. To start, I will present the scene right before Curtis enters the engine room. He is explaining what happened in the tail section when the train first departed.
Wilfred's soldiers came and they took everything. It's 1,000 people in an iron box. No food, no water. After a month, we ate the week.
The shot starts as a close-up of Curtis's face in order to keep the focus on his expression and drive an emotional response in the viewers. In addition, there are very few cuts, making the scene feel very personal and dramatic. During the first few months, people in the tail section resorted to cannibalism. In their eyes, it was the only way to keep the future going. Just as Wilfred sees his dictatorship and society necessary, the people in the tail section thought eating the weak was their only option.
And some men with knives came. They killed her and they took her baby. And then an old man, no relation, just an old man, stepped forward and he said, "Give me the knife." And everyone thought he'd kill the baby himself. But he took the knife. And he cut off his arm. And he said, "Eat this. You're so hungry. Eat this, just..."
Once a sacrifice was made by William, the old man who sacrifices his arm, and followed by the people of the tail section, the ideas that drive the future forward changed. There is no more killing, only sacrificing by the many in order to preserve a new future. Up until then, the idea of a desperate future caused Curtis to resort to murder in the present. He was blinded to the alternative, sacrifice, or giving up some benefit of the present in order to preserve and improve the future. A very similar situation can be seen in Wilfred's mind. The only difference is that he is not willing to give up some of the luxuries at the front of the train in order to look for alternative futures. Therefore, he feels that his idea of the future and how they control the present require him to suppress the tail section. Now compare this to our society. As Fritsch explains in his article Democracy, Climate Change, and Environmental Justice, our capitalistic society today has a hard time allowing for sacrifices of production, as it will put you behind others. If everybody agreed to sacrifice some quality of life, the future can improve universally and it wouldn't look so threatening. But on a global scale, this is very difficult. It is our commodification of life and our unyielding grasp on property and competition that makes universal sacrifice for the future so difficult. This is the idea that modern dystopias stem from, as previously explained, and the idea that climate change is punishing. So going back to my thesis, the grim future controls Wilfred's train in the present, along with everything about our society today, simply because we have a hard time changing the present to account for things that are so far away.